Here in the Welsh National Herbarium within the National Museum in Cardiff, there are over 600,000 botanical specimens. These range from flowering plants, conifers and ferns, to mosses, algae, lichens and fungi. Over a third of specimens were collected in Wales, and as 80% of Wales is classed as upland, upland habitats are very well represented in the museum's collections. The collections in Amgueddfa Cymru are a physical record of plants found in Wales and in the rest of the world over the past few hundred years. They are owned by the people of Wales as a record of our natural heritage, and every specimen is unique. We don't just have one example of each species of plant. By keeping more than one specimen of each plant, we can study different stages in its life cycle and how it changes through the seasons in just one visit to the collections. Once preserved in the collections, we can refer back to these specimens at any time, even hundreds of years later. Some of our oldest specimens date back to the 18th century. Using specimens collected in Wales throughout the centuries, we can also study a plant through time, passing through the Industrial Revolution to the present day. In this way, we can monitor the effects of climate change on this species and on other plants living in the same type of habitat. Botany collections are a time machine for plant biological research. And we aren't just restricted to looking at specimens from our museum. A network of collections such as these across the world enables more plants and more countries to be studied here in Wales. Collections donated to the museum expand the botanical archives of Wales and give us tangible snapshots of our flora over time. One such collection is that of the self-taught botanist Evan Roberts. Evan Roberts lived in the uplands of Wales in Capel Curig. Initially, he worked as a quarryman until the quarry closed in 1953. He then became the first warden of the first National Nature Reserve in Wales at Cymru. He was an inspiration to visitors and a fountain of knowledge on the alpine plants of Snowdonia. Arctic alpine plants such as mountain avens and alpine meadow rue are at the southern limit of their distribution in Wales. This specialised group is highly adapted to life in the highest altitudes in Snowdonia. Roberts rediscovered the Snowdon lily in 1960 at a time when it was thought to be extinct. This is an Arctic alpine plant that in Britain only grows in Snowdonia and has been named as the county flower of Carnarvonshire. Roberts documented the plants in the Capel Curig area, and the museum is hoping shortly to be acquiring his plant collection. He donated many specimens to the museum during his lifetime, but his personal collection will greatly enhance the National Herbarium, an invaluable archive of upland plants to add to the museum collections. Historical collections are valuable because we can't replicate them in the same historical context, and because we no longer collect rare plants in the same way. Botanists will photograph them as a record rather than remove rare plants from the wild. In the Welsh Flora barcoding project, this goes a step further. Historical as well as recently collected specimens have been used to create standard references for the entire Welsh flora. The DNA from a specimen of every species of flowering plant in Wales was extracted. This was then used to create reference barcodes, meaning in the future we can identify each species from small fragments of the plant. This will help identification of plants in the future, reducing the need to collect to identify species under a microscope. This specimen of the rare mountain everlasting was used in the Welsh Flora barcoding project. Small samples of specimen were taken to extract DNA without having to damage wild populations. Thanks to the work of Dr. Tim Rich, the collections at National Museum Wales are rich in whitebeams and hawkweeds. Some, such as Lay's whitebeam and the Snowdon hawkweed, are rare endemics that only grow in upland Wales. Hawkweeds are difficult to tell apart, and in the museum's collections you can compare species such as the Snowdon hawkweed alongside other rare species such as the Black Mountain hawkweed, which is only found in the limestone uplands of the Brecon Beacons.